Years later, the church reopened. Not because the village had grown braver, but because silence eventually becomes unbearable. The doors were repaired, the icons were cleaned, the bell returned to its place, and the clergy approved it. Officially, it was a renewal, a restoration of order. But the village knew something the papers never said out loud. A church can be reopened, a building can be restored, but not everything that happens inside it stays buried. For a long time, there was no priest. Not because the village didn't want one, but because no one wanted the village. To the clergy, it was an inconvenient place, a quiet corner of southeastern Europe where history had stains that wouldn't wash out. But the people kept the church alive in small ways. Candles lit for the dead, prayers whispered behind closed doors, weddings postponed, confessions avoided. Eventually, even the clergy admitted what the village already knew. Without a priest, a church becomes a shell. And a shell becomes a rumor, and a rumor becomes fear. So the clergy promised a solution. A priest would come, a man eager to serve, a man willing to take responsibility for a forgotten parish. The village prepared itself for a stranger. But what returned to them was not a stranger. At first, they didn't recognize him. He was older now. His posture was different, his face calmer. He greeted them politely, soft voice, measured gestures. The clergy's letter was read out loud in front of the church. He had been rehabilitated, forgiven, changed. The village listened the way villagers listen, with their mouths closed and their minds wide open. There were those who stared at the ground, refusing to meet his eyes. There were those who watched him too closely. And there were those who smiled because they wanted to believe. Because belief is easier than suspicion, and hope is easier than memory. The priest spoke simply. He did not mention the past. He did not explain the years of absence. He did not defend himself. He only said he was grateful and ready. And the village, exhausted from emptiness, accepted the answer it had been offered. The first weeks were tense. People came to church like they came to a trial, not to pray, but to watch. They listened for a mistake, a slip, a sign. But the priest gave them none. He worked harder than anyone expected. He repaired what others wouldn't touch. He visited the sick. He spoke gently to widows. He stood in the rain during funerals while preaching. And slowly, the village began to soften. The bell rang again. The choir returned. The church smelled of incense instead of dust. Confession reopened. And that was when the real test began. Because a sermon can be performed, a blessing can be staged. But confession is different. Confession is where people speak into darkness and expect darkness not to answer back. At first, nothing strange happened. People left the confessional relieved, some even smiling. And for a time, the village started to believe the impossible. That the clergy were right, that the old story was over, that the priest who returned was not the priest who left. The change was not sudden. It never is. It began with small fatigue, a moment too long staring at the altar, a pause in speech, a look of irritation when someone asked a harmless question. After services, he would remain in the church after everyone left, not praying, not cleaning, just standing as if listening. Then the nervousness appeared. Not public rage, not violence. Something worse. Containment. Like a man holding a door shut from the inside. Villagers noticed, but dismissed it.
He's exhausted.
He's carrying the whole community.
He's devoted.
And devotion is an easy excuse. The first true incident happened during an evening service. There were fewer people than usual. The light was low. The shadows were deeper. At the end, the priest spoke a final blessing. But his voice did not match his face. It was still quiet, still controlled. Yet the words felt wrong. Not sinful, not obscene. Just foreign. The kind of foreignness that makes the skin tighten. A woman near the front crossed herself twice, fast. A man near the door stepped back without realizing it. For a moment, the priest's breath stopped in the middle of a sentence. Not a pause for emphasis. A pause like someone had taken the words away. The candle flames did not flicker, they leaned. The priest's mouth kept moving, but the rhythm of his voice changed, slightly out of step with his own face. The final blessing sounded familiar, yet shaped wrong, as if it had been learned by listening from the other side of a door. A child in the second row began to cry without understanding why. No one comforted him, not because they didn't care, because they were all listening to the same thing. Then it passed. And then, as quickly as it came, it ended. The priest blinked, cleared his throat, and smiled, a normal smile. The village went home and tried to pretend it didn't happen. But pretending has a cost, and the cost always comes due. Not long after that evening service, she returned. The woman from the past years, the one who had been mentioned in whispers back when the priest first disappeared. The village remembered her. They remembered how she used to sit still during sermons, as if she were hearing something no one else could hear. They remembered the way she stopped speaking to her neighbors. They remembered the look on her face when the priest was removed. Now she began coming again. At first, she sat in the back, head down, hands clasped so tightly her fingers turned pale. But each week, she changed. Not physically, something deeper. She started arriving early and leaving late. She watched the priest the way a person watches a fire, not because it is beautiful, but because it might spread. One day, someone heard her whispering outside the church after service. Not prayers, warnings. The village didn't ask what she meant. Villagers rarely ask questions they are afraid to answer. Instead, they labeled her
mad,
Unstable,
possessed herself.
And that word began to move quietly through the village like smoke. Possessed. The priest continued his work. But now the air around him felt different. Not heavy, expectant. As if the church itself was waiting for something to happen. Rumors do not stay in one village. They travel the same way prayers travel, from mouth to mouth, from fear to fear. Someone spoke to someone who had a cousin. Someone wrote a letter to someone who used to serve in a nearby parish. And eventually, the story reached a man the church no longer advertised. An old priest. Retired, withdrawn. The kind of man people remembered only when they ran out of options. An exorcist. He had not performed rites in years. He lived quietly, as if he were trying to forget something that refused to be forgotten. When he heard the rumors, he did not react like a superstitious man. He reacted like someone recognizing a pattern. He asked only 2 questions.
How long has it been happening?
And
did it return or did it arrive?
Then he stood up, took his coat, and left. He came without announcement. No dramatic arrival, no entourage, no public confrontation. Just an old man in a worn coat, stepping into a church that had once been abandoned. The priest noticed him immediately. But the exorcist did not imagine things. He walked slowly down the aisle, as if measuring the air. Then he stopped and spoke.
You returned.
I did. The church welcomed me back.
The church or the clergy?
Are they not the same?
Not always.
Why are you here?
To see if the village is safe.
From what?
From what returns wearing a familiar face.
You speak like a man who expects monsters.
I speak like a man who has met them. It seems you didn't come here alone.
What do you mean I didn't come here alone?
The priest's smile stayed on his face, but his eyes did not. That night, the exorcist did not go to the mayor. He did not call the clergy. He did not gather the villagers. He could have, but he didn't. Because fear spreads faster than truth. And because if the village panicked, the thing inside the priest would not hide anymore. It would move. It would choose new places to live. The old exorcist watched the people as they left church. He watched the woman in the back, her face tight with dread. He understood something then. The village had already been infected. Not with disease, with denial. And denial is a doorway. The only way to close it was to face what had stepped through. He chose a night when the church was empty. No audience, no witnesses who would misremember, no villagers to suffer the consequences of hearing something they couldn't unhear. The priest stayed late, as he often did, standing in the center of the church, listening. The exorcist entered without knocking. The priest did not turn around, as if he already knew. The air in the church felt thick. Not like fog, like pressure. The exorcist spoke softly. Not to the priest. To whatever was occupying the priest's silence. What happened next was not like the films. There were no flying objects, no screaming crowds. There was only a man and something inside him that did not belong to him.
I am an exorcist. You are not hidden here.
You think you know what you're looking at.
This man is possessed, and what is in him is not human.
Not human is a simple word for an old fear.
Leave him. You were not invited. You have no home here.
The priest's body did not change, but the room did. The silence bent. The candle flames leaned away from the altar as if avoiding something, and then a sound emerged. Not a scream, a breath. Like something exhaling for the first time in a long time. The priest staggered, hands on the pew, eyes wide, and for a moment he looked human again. By morning, the priest was gone. No farewell, no confession, no explanation. The clergy issued no statement. The village did what villagers do best. Some said he left because he was ashamed. Some said he left because he was threatened. Some said he never left at all, but walked into the forest and vanished. The woman who had been called mad did not speak much after that, but she began sleeping again. And that, more than any rumor, convinced the exorcist he had not been too late. The old man remained, not because he wanted to, because someone had to. The clergy approved it quickly, as if grateful the problem had resolved itself. The village accepted him with a kind of quiet relief. He did not preach grand sermons. He did not demand devotion. He simply restored routine. And yet, every time he locked the church door at night, he did it carefully, as if he knew the truth. A village can rebuild a church. A community can forgive a priest, but forgiveness does not erase what entered. And some things do not leave forever. He listened. Nothing moved inside. He turned the key, once, then again, slower. And as he stepped away, the church bell rope, hanging in the darkness behind the door, shifted slightly, as if something inside had brushed past it.